Say you're in trouble. You're being mugged. You need help. You're screaming. You're frantic. You look around and you see someone who is wearing a badge and appears to have a law enforcement officer's uniform on. Would you expect that person to help you? Would you hope that that person would help you? For most people, this would be a resounding yes. Now imagine that you get that person's attention and they say, just a minute, I'll get you some help. They pick up their radio and they call, and in 2 minutes your help arrives. Well, the mugger has accomplished his job. He's taken everything from your identity to get through security and all of your loved ones' pictures, any money you had in your wallet. It's gone because it takes about a minute for a mugger to accomplish his job, or less than a minute. This situation is a minor situation compared to the shooting of a TSA officer in an airport in 2013. On October 31st of 2013, the first murder of a TSA officer happened in an airport in the United States. This TSA officer and some of his friends were hurt, and some of the surrounding people were hurt. Just because it was the only one in 12 years that had happened in the administration, the TSA administration, it does not mean it made it any less traumatic or tragic for his friends and family. It seems like anyone with a badge these days is being targeted. Firemen, policemen, deputies, anyone that wears a badge and seems to look official is being targeted by bad people. My husband, who was in law enforcement for 13 years, always knew the risks. I was his wife. I always knew the risks. He could have been hurt at any given moment. In talking with friends and family who are still in law enforcement, it almost is not worth the risk these days. It used to be that bad people were known. We knew who bad people were. We responded to the calls. Law enforcement went to the calls. They knew that those bad people could hurt them. Anymore, it seems like people don't give any warning. They just walk up and shoot law enforcement officers through the windows of their vehicles. The man 2.5 years ago who committed that terrible crime, he rambled about hating the government, and he targeted TSA officers. He walked through the airport and he asked specifically, "Are you a TSA officer?" And if someone said no, then they walked away. He'd say, "Are you a TSA officer?" When he got to someone that was, he killed them. He shot several other people and wounded them. And do we know, did he target the TSA officer because he wasn't armed and he wasn't trained to handle the situation? We probably will never know. Should TSA be armed? Let's qualify that first. There are some TSA officers who are armed. The air marshals and special projects officers are armed, and they receive significantly more pay. They also receive the training it takes for them to be armed and to handle a combat situation or a high security situation, a high threat security situation. I don't feel the issues of the ticket checkers, baggage handlers, and security point check people being armed is a black and white issue. According to blog.tsa.org, in 2013, regular TSA security officers found about 1,800 firearms in baggage, and almost half of those firearms were loaded. I'm all for gun rights, but there are definitely rules that should be followed with guns, and we all know that we don't put a gun in our bag, and if a gun does go through airport security, there's a lot of different measures that have to be taken for it to get from point A to point B, and it doesn't get to go in your carry-on. Apparently 1,800 people in 2013 didn't follow these rules. Now, I don't know if these people wish ill will of other people, but you would think at least some of them had to have been thinking something badly, or they were just trying to get away with it to see if they could break the rules. Yes, regular TSA officers should be armed and should be able to defend themselves in the event of an attack. They wear an official uniform that looks a lot like a law enforcement uniform. It has a badge that looks very official. They have patches on their shoulders that look very official. They wear an American flag just like law enforcement officers do. It's not fair to leave them defenseless. But here's the issue. They do not have the amount of training to be armed for combat or a high security, high combat situation. And while one cannot really put a price on being shot at, a little more compensation would definitely be appropriate. According to TSA.org, to become a TSA officer, you must have a high school diploma, be a U.S. citizen, and be able to pass a drug screening and a background check. The starting pay listed on that site is around $37,000 annually. It is preferred that a TSA officer has experience as an X-ray technician or experience in law enforcement or background in the military. Some might say, there has only been one person die in the last 14 years. Why is this such a big deal? Have you been paying attention to our world today? Violent and specific terrorist incidents happen every day, and they happen more and more every day. These terrorists, foreign and domestic, have absolutely no regard for human life. They don't have conscience. Just like the man who walked through and targeted a TSA officer. He was very specific as to who he was looking for. Violent and specific incidents like the shooting in 2013 have been on the rise for a very long time, and it's not going to bypass our airports. It's just going to get worse. What better place to cause something catastrophic and horrible than a place with thousands of people that move through it every single day? This may sound very extreme, but I would rather there be too much security when I fly than not enough. I would rather one of those security officers be able to help me if I need help than have to call somebody and wait 2 minutes for them to get there. Why not arm TSA officers and add one more line of support? Better to be prepared, I say. So how do we fix this? I believe there are two things that can be done. If it is determined that TSA security officers shouldn't be armed, then they need to have an armed police officer or trained and armed security guard readily available to them. Readily available meaning less than 30 seconds away. At all times, private security firms could be hired, or airport police would need to be almost tripled to accommodate at some airports. It seems like a very roundabout solution to a problem that could be more easily fixed. The second recommendation is the easier fix in my mind. I could see making a TSA officer able to defend themselves should the public or they be threatened. Of course, they would have to make more money, and it would definitely take more money to train them. I feel with the frivolous spending our government does on an hourly basis, they could find the money somewhere in the budget, not only to make TSA officers safer, but the public around them safer. It seems the biggest argument around for not training and paying TSA officers is money. If our nation can pay for empty federal buildings and pay outrageous salaries to certain congressmen and senators, they can certainly fork over the budget to make our airport employees and citizens a little safer. I know I would feel safer to have one more line of defense. If they are trained to do their job correctly, then there should not be an issue. I do believe TSA security officers should be armed and should be trained and compensated to be armed and to be able to keep us all a little bit safer.